Hello. Hi. Today's topic is on consent lifestyle, and we have with us Karishma, who is already here. So let me just. Hi, Karishma.
Hi, how's it going?
Don't ask, yeah. So today's live we are talking about consent, and I think I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, and um, I like let's just say that consent is something which everybody talks about, but it's probably in a very surface level. So today let's go a little deeper than that. So if we can just talk a little bit about what do you understand by consent, like just take a minute and just so that everybody's in the same page. Let's do that.
Yeah. So, consent in literal terms means voluntary agreement, right? But
Yeah.
in the realm of sex and relationships, I think consent is more nuanced and more complicated. Um, the best definition I've heard is that it's like an ongoing negotiation or an ongoing discussion about people's boundaries within a relationship.
Yeah.
And I I love that definition because I think
Yeah.
it captures a lot of the different characteristics of consent where like it can change and it has to be like freely given but also like an ongoing negotiation around different even sexual activities on different days, different months, whatever it might be, right? Different
Yeah.
people, different situations. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what's really important about consent is because it's kind of a buzzword right now. Um, I feel like I feel like a lot of times it's used in a way that's like, oh, consent is super sexy. Like, oh my God, that guy was so hot. He asked me for consent every step of the way, and I'm like,
That's
consent
basic.
is it's mandatory. Like if consent is absent from a sexual interaction, that is not consensual sex. Like and I won't label that what the lack of consent is because that can be different depending on the situation, but like
Of course.
the fact is that consent is mandatory. It's not some extra spice you're adding to your
Yeah.
sex life. No, it is the most basic
Today,
skill.
ask me.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
So this is something interesting, right? So today we are talking about not just consent, we are talking about a lifestyle of consent. So, how I usually tell my like my clients and people is just that, how a lot of your job, suppose if you're a doctor, you have a different lifestyle as compared to if you're a teacher or if you are a like watchman, like whoever, like, your
Right.
job definitely adds to what you are as a person and it adds to your lifestyle. And similarly, when this is something which I realized when I'm a psychologist and I'm also a sexuality educator, both of them we talk about boundaries a lot, right? As a mental health
Mm-hmm.
professional and here also. And I saw myself not just having consensual talks in relationships, but also in general life. And I saw that becoming so liberating for people when I would ask them something. It would be like, oh my God, she is really, taking care of what my needs are, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my understanding of like having a lifestyle where you, honor other person's choices and honor your own choices. So, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think about consensual lifestyle?
I think it's so important. And I think it's something that's really, in my experience of living and growing here in India, it's not something that's practiced at all. Because, especially, I mean, I think especially because there's so many different factors, but I think one that comes up a lot is when there's any sort of power dynamic involved. So, like when there's
Yeah.
elders and someone younger, when it's a parent, when it's a grandparent, when it's a
Hmm.
teacher, there's so much of this, like especially with age, it's like, okay, this person who's older than you knows what's best for you,
Yeah.
and it gets pushed into every corner, right? Like consent is thrown out the window when it's like there's no boundaries around physical space, no boundaries around like, you know, sometimes parents will even go through like a child's phone, not a child, but like an adult human who is their
Yeah.
offspring, their phone, or like telling people what to eat, how to exercise. Like
Yeah.
it can be
Yeah.
any sort of thing, right? Like within life, and I think it's something that needs to be practiced within relationships, any form of relationships. And
Yeah.
like you said, when we think of consent as a lifestyle, we honor that the other person has a choice in the matter around their own emotional and physical boundaries, and we're not
Yeah.
imposing on them, even if, and it's as simple as like, say, Shivli, I truly believe that you will benefit from drinking a glass of water right now, right? And even if it will benefit you, I can't force you to drink that glass of water. I can say, hey, Shivli, do you want to drink a glass of water? I can offer you the glass of water, but I can't shove it down your throat because that is just not okay.
Yeah. That's
And I
not true.
feel, yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
feel
And
like
I
that's what
think,
ends up happening.
yeah, and
Yeah,
especially in when we are talking about an Indian household scenario, it's
yeah.
not like you will never hear a parent say something like that. It will be like pani pio, it
Yeah.
like a statement, like a
let me
thing, and you
let me
have to
can
do
I
it.
yeah, I have a funny anecdote. So I went to college in the US, and in my first semester, like my first few weeks there, I'm like working backstage. I was like lowest rung of the ladder. My job was to sweep the stage, okay, before the play
Mhm.
started. That was one of my jobs. So
Yeah,
I remember one time I was like sitting and chatting with someone. I didn't do my job on time, and then the person who was like supervising me, he came and he was like, "Hey, do you wanna maybe sweep the stage?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, why are you asking me? That's my job. Like, you can just tell me to
yeah.
come and do it. I was so
Mhm.
confused, and then I realized like
How are
that
they
is
being
just
so
the
respectful?
no, it's not just respectful. It's like this way of speaking where like the other person is honored in like their wants and needs, even if it's their job to do it.
Yeah,
And even if it's and I'm not saying that that is the way we need to communicate all the time. That is just a
yeah,
different cultural thing. But I think it was interesting for me to like experience that, because like, yeah,
Mhm.
my mom would have just said jharu lagao, right? Like she would not
Yeah,
have um
exactly.
given me an
Yeah,
option. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
if we are talking about, teaching consent to people
yeah.
as a lifestyle, what are the different scenarios that you can think of where people can be taught aspects of consent in a very tiny manner, not like giving them a lecture or like showing them something and things like that, but
Yeah.
just, standing up for what you believe in.
Hmm. So I think, and do you mean that in like the consent in a classroom teaching consent, or just like in any
In
situation?
daily life, I don't mean particularly in
Yeah,
classroom, but in daily life,
right.
if you are,
In daily life,
yeah.
I think the first thing is what you said, Shivli, like model the behavior. And I think
Hmm.
if people find that you are respecting their point of view, they are more likely to respect your point of view, right? Like if
Yeah,
I ask you, hey, is it okay if I put the lights off? Like your friend will next time ask you, is it okay if I put the lights off, right? Like
yeah,
it, I think that's the very first step. The next step is boundary setting. And that can be for the smallest of things, right? I was thinking about how in school, when I was sitting next to a person who I was not so close to, right? Like when teachers would shuffle us when we were
yeah,
in like middle school. If I was sitting next to someone I didn't know and they needed a pencil, they would ask me, hey, Karishma, can I borrow a pencil? But if I was sitting next to a best friend, they would just like grab my pencil box, take whatever they wanted, like even if I didn't have a pencil, and then put it back. And like in some ways it was cute. There was this level of familiarity, but there were some days where I was genuinely annoyed, but I didn't feel like I had the space to express that, right?
yeah,
And I think when it comes to like physical objects and stuff, naming when it bothers you, like naming that boundary is important. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, why are you doing this? Like, who said you could take my pencil, right? Because I think that is what my instinct was to react when I was 12, 13 years old. But more like a rational, calm conversation around like, hey, I feel um I feel confused, or I feel unprepared for class when you take my pencil. So
Yeah.
could you just ask me next time? Like stating what you need, but also
Yeah.
stating
Yeah.
how it's making you
Of course.
feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
It's
that
so important.
becomes
Yeah.
teaching also. Like you
Yeah.
teaching people in your life how to respect your boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's also I think knowing that it's okay for you to be in a situation where if somebody says no to you, that's not them saying no to you and your existence, but maybe
Yeah.
that's their need and they want that space, and that's completely okay for you to just take that no and just figure
Yeah.
life without that. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a much like not discussed conversation of like how it's not just about asking, but also being ready for whatever answer might come your way.
receiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the thing, that's the missing aspect I feel that is there with consent. Because I think definitely the idea of consent has come within the last 10 years in our movies and things, like with
Mm-hmm.
movies like Pink and like all of these movies where no means no became a huge thing. And that's very true to a large extent. But then when we are talking about, well, how do you say no? Or how do you take when somebody is saying no? Those
Mm-hmm.
aspects of and nitty gritties of this can be very difficult to figure out. But yeah. So, if I can ask you, how do you work towards communicating if there is a person, suppose,
Hmm.
who has not taken consent from you for, for something that they are doing? Then how do you work towards communicating these things to them? Like when your
Hmm.
consent has, when there has been activity which has been of your non-consent, how do you tell them
Right.
that?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question to answer because it depends so much on context and it depends so much on
Yeah.
the relationship and what the situation is, right? Like if someone takes my pencil and without telling me, I'm not going to necessarily be like as emotionally hurt as if someone like touched me non-consensually, right?
Yeah.
And so I think those two conversations have different like levels of severity. So
Of
I'll
course.
start with like something low level or something that like you don't necessarily need to stop in the moment. Like something like, okay, pencil was taken or whatever, right? Like that is something that you can have a calm, rational discussion about later on. But I think if you find yourself in a situation where someone is just not taking no for an answer, or someone is like saying, and content warning for our viewers, like if someone is content warning around like sexual coercion, if someone is saying things like oh, just do it for me now, like please, why do you always say no, you're always like this, you kill the mood, like things like that are just not okay. And
Yeah.
if you find yourself in a situation where someone is saying that, especially when you're in a relationship with them, it becomes harder and harder to say no. And I think it becomes important to find ways to remove yourself from that situation if that's an option for you. So that can literally be like, and I'm literally saying this in a sexual context. It can be like, I need to use the bathroom. I just got a phone call. I need to go home.
Yeah.
Like literally phone a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Get
so
out of the situation. Yeah.
get out of the situation. This is like short term. But I'd say
Yeah.
longer term, if someone is violating your consent, it would help a lot to like create a safety plan around
Yeah.
just
And
like,
maybe I think one thing which I remember doing it with my roommate when we were living in college is
hmm,
banning couple of people from our house because they
yeah,
were so difficult to deal with, and they would not
yeah,
take a no from for an answer, that we would just ban these people from coming to our house altogether. where we were like,
Yeah.
just don't come. So Karishma, we are getting questions. Let me
Yeah,
just read
please.
out one question. This is somebody asking, I feel I'm not able to say no. I find it hard to express my boundaries. How do I get over this?
Yeah. I think that's definitely a true question. And I think it's so gendered. I think it like affects the people of different genders in different ways. Where like on one hand, people who are women, non-binary, gender non-conforming, basically genders oppressed by the patriarchy, it becomes difficult to speak up and assert ourselves and say that um, I don't want to do this, or feel like we don't have as much power in that situation. But at the same time, I think with men, there's like this assumption that men are always ready for sex and need to always be ready for whatever sexual activity is offered to them, even if they don't want to. And so
Yeah,
I want to acknowledge that this answer can look very different depending on who you are and what identities you hold.
yeah,
Um, but I think when it comes to boundary setting, I would say start small. Start with really basic things in your life. And I like to use this formula. It's not a very nuanced formula, it's just a basic like, when you do this, I feel this, and replace this with whatever you
your
feel.
feelings.
When,
Yeah,
yeah, when you do this, I feel this, and I would really love if you do this other thing
yeah,
instead, right?
yeah.
And there's this Instagram page, the Indian sex therapist, Neha Bhatt. I don't know if you follow her, but she's put out a few like really good posts about boundary setting within the Indian context. And I
Mm-hmm.
really liked it because she names that boundary setting is different in our context. Like you can't just tell your mother or grandmother like, hey, when you walk into my room, like I don't like it, right? Like, or I feel upset. You can't necessarily just outright express your feelings in the same way. You have to also acknowledge the hierarchies present and
Yeah,
name that, like, okay, when you come into my room, or I love when you come into my room and I love hanging out with you, and I really
but
value your company. But
yeah,
yeah, so like also,
yeah.
also like the
Putting the
sandwich
but in
compliment.
between and yeah, like a
Yeah,
sandwich thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So, somebody's asking, identifying red flags is important. How is it possible to identify all the time?
yeah.
Um, can I answer this?
So yeah, go for it. And then I have something I'll add on. Yeah.
So I think with regards to boundary setting and with regards to identifying, um, red flags or identifying problematic behavior, one of the basic things that I work with my clients is working on our instincts. Because of
Mm-hmm.
course our instincts and our gut feelings are there for a reason and they are there to
Yeah.
protect us. So when a person feels uncomfortable with presence of somebody, with somebody's comment, with somebody's way of being, anything it could be, and when that happens, you kind of work towards trusting your gut and understanding that this is something which is probably happening for you. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of times I've seen with my clients, especially, a lot of times when they are in situations where it's a very toxic relationship, where they have been constantly coerced into doing things, a lot of these people have come up and told me that they knew that this was happening to them because their gut was telling them that way, but they just felt
Mm-hmm.
like it didn't work. And I completely agree with, it also has to do with the gender, with your sexual
Yeah.
orientation, with so many different aspects of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think my only thing would be then to trust your gut.
Yeah. And actually, what I was gonna say is very similar. Someone told
Mm,
me that like you your emotions are data, and your emotions, like you're feeling the way you're feeling for a reason. And that is the most important data point more than anything else, because you can look up all these things about red flags, but they may not apply to your personal boundaries because each person's boundaries are different. So
yeah,
for example, Like, I may love texting my partner and want to text them like 24/7, but for someone else, that might be like really uncomfortable, really like controlling,
Difficult.
to like
Yeah.
difficult to communicate 24/7. And that's just a different like set of values and different set
Yeah.
of boundaries, right?
Yeah.
But if
And a lot
someone
of
is
times
forcing
that
you,
could, sorry,
yeah,
but just continuing, a lot
no,
of
no,
times
yeah,
people could get hurt by, oh, but I text them and they don't text back, and
yeah,
that's because they don't like me or something like that
yeah,
happens. Wherein,
yeah,
like you're saying, it's just different set of values. Yeah.
different set of values. And I think that's the other thing, right? Like, a red flag is when someone is forcing you to fit their definition, or they're saying, oh, this is how things are supposed to be, or like, oh, this is the role you play as a girlfriend, or like whatever, like
Whatever.
as your
Yeah.
boyfriend I can tell you which boys to be friends with, like whatever, like random examples
Mm.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so last question is somebody's asking how to ask to no consent, as it would be awkward if you jump to do something naughty and then she says no.
Yeah, definitely don't do something naughty without asking first.
Yeah.
Um, because that is way, way worse. Way, 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 way worse. And way more like awkward is the least of it, but like way more uncomfortable than just asking. And people find it weird because we don't see social scripts for this in our movies, TV shows, songs,
Yeah, in
whatever,
movies
pop
it's like
culture.
if you follow her around, she will eventually say yes.
Right. But not only that, it's like, oh, eyes lock and they just know that they're gonna kiss, and then they kiss and everyone's happy, right? Like
Yeah.
that shit's not real.
Yeah.
It looks different for different people.
Yeah.
And so it might feel weird the first couple of times and maybe practicing it at home, but like just be like, hey, can I kiss you? Or like, hey, I would really love if I can kiss you. And there's so many ways to make that sound romantic, make them sound sexy. Um, yeah, it can be really,
Yeah. And I
there are
think
different ways to do that. Yeah.
one more thing which I keep on saying to my clients
Yeah.
also is when you are working towards, understanding consent in the bedroom, you know, then talk
Hmm.
outside of the bedroom, like talk about sex
Yeah.
outside bedroom, and just say things like, these are the things which I like to do, these are the things which I don't like to do, or I would, like you're saying, I would really like to hug you this way, I would really like to do this with you, and then discuss this as a very normal thing, as like you would discuss like weather, as you would discuss corona, as you would discuss any other thing in your day to day life.
Yeah.
Because I think the moment we try to make sexual conversations as a daily conversation, it becomes immediately very easy to work towards any other thing, because then that couple who's discussing sexuality and sex outside of the bedroom is doing something right, because then they are like, even if there are like, at least in my practice I've seen, even if they have problems in the bedroom, they go out, like not immediately, but they find time during the day to sort it out together also and talk about it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love that. I think that's the other thing, especially when it comes to if you want to try something new in bed, like something
exactly,
that's edgy, something that's naughty, like
exactly.
talk about it when the pressure's off. Because when you're
Yeah.
hot, when you're like naked, or even like lights are off or you start making out, like it can be intimidating to ask the question, and it can also be intimidating to answer the
Answer.
question honestly because you
It
want to
will be
please
like
the other
you're
person.
cornered into something
Yeah.
and
Right.
you don't know what to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I think Dr. Rashi also gave some answers. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. Um, yeah. Okay. Cool. So I think we have answered quite a lot of questions. Karishma, do you have something that you would like to address before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me. I think that consent consent is a conversation that's like not a one-time conversation. It is
Yeah.
a process, it is a journey. It will look different every time you are with someone new, and it's I think there's so much we need to unlearn in order to learn consent. And I think
Yeah,
yeah, like be kind to yourself on this journey, but also hold yourself accountable to doing it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that's the key of it, right? A lot of times people don't do it because they are scared to make mistakes. And
Hmm.
honestly, that happens, right? You are bound to make mistakes. The
Yeah.
nobody is going to not do it. But I think the difference between a person who is learning and the person who is rigid is that once they make the mistake, they are willing to not even just apologize but also make up for it in a very genuine manner and not to repeat that again. So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
difference between a person who is genuinely sorry and a person who is just using sorry as an excuse to get again, to get
Right.
with it again. So
Yeah.
that's the basic end line. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Karishma, for coming in, and thank you everybody for joining in. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and like we are saying, we can continue these conversations over time. And yeah, okay, chalo, I'll see you
Thank you
later
so
then.
much.
And
All right.
bye, people.
Bye bye.